let me speak on that from another personal note about. Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Oh, I couldn't stop myself. After a while, I had to look around and see if I recognized anybody in my neighborhood, because you're reinforcing the stereotypes in everything that you're saying. And I think I understand, you're talking about the impact of the crack epidemic on the community and crack babies, and, I had some understanding of all of that, but coming from an integrated neighborhood, those stereotypes are so dangerous. Just like this lady mentioned, oh, that's a drug house. I never believe it. When I hear in my neighborhood, that's a drug house, don't believe
Where
it.
do you live?
I live in Mott Park.
Okay.
I live in Mott Park.
Mom, oh, that's over here off by Beach Road.
Flushing Vale.
Oh, okay. Well, if I were you, I grew up in a very segregated neighborhood. It was one white family and one Asian family, and you only see them taking the groceries in and out of the house. Never played in the yard, none of that stuff. So, if I tend to take things very serious about stuff like this drug house and stuff like that, because it's more like it's true. Let me say this. When I was young, I sold drugs. And I made enough money to live wherever I wanted to live. So if I wanted to live in a Mott Park, and it's crazy because I actually cut people hair that I talk to, they sell drugs, they live in Mott Park, they stay behind the clearing.
Sure. I'm sure they are, but their drug house is like a code word for any neighbors you don't like. You would like.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, it's
Right. But
It's
they need to find a new code word.
Code word for what? Code word for any neighbor you don't like how they act or how the kids act. That's a drug house.
Yeah, that's not a good. That's something very serious.
It is. There are people in the neighborhoods who believe that. They believe that every single black family in the neighborhood is dealing drugs. I shouldn't say every single, but
That's the whole part about, not to cut you off, that's the whole part about me being a business owner, and my past is that I can't take my skin off. I'm this way. I look this way, and if you see how I'm dressed, I'm comfortable this way. So what you're, not too personal, but if you see me as, that's your fault because you didn't take it. If I'm your neighbor, you should take the time out. Like I was saying, we should be able to communicate with each other.
And I agree. 100%, but I'm scared because of the number of neighbors I have who are not willing to talk to their neighbors.
What they got to do with you?
What it's got to do with me is the young families that are struggling to make it in my neighborhood are being ostracized.
Do they know it's like, is this a conversation that's being had about them that they probably don't even know or care?
And then maybe abuse and said something, what does that person might make the other neighbors want to go?
Yeah, so we all, at the end of the day, we all human beings. I woke up with this beautiful brown skin. It's never going anywhere. People gonna think about me whatever they want to think. Only thing I can do is with my mentor group, my children, and events like this is to make sure that whatever your preconceived notions were about me, when you leave me, you don't have them anymore.
And I agree 100% with everything you're saying. It's so important that we talk to our neighbors. I can't go to a neighborhood association meeting in Mott Park without losing my temper, kissing everybody. You know, and they make me act crazy.
Stop doing that. Just talk to your neighbors.
Well, I don't go to their meetings anymore. I don't go to their meetings.
And
They
they
make me
talk
crazy.
to them.
Ms. Dunn?
Well, it's sort of interesting that this came out, my brother, who does not live here in Flint, but they had a drug house, young group of kids moved in next door to a parent's home who had moved out, so the kids were all in there. And it took that incident to bring the neighbors together. My brother's a musician, he threw a concert in his backyard. And before that, the neighbors didn't know each other.
Yeah.
But they came to the backyard, potluck little thing, you know, and they came to the backyard and they got to know each other. And so going back to the idea of maybe the neighbors need to create that neutral space.
Right.
You know, the neighbors who, you know, are there and care. And I certainly understand that there are neighborhoods where you've got stable homes and you've got unstable homes because of renting or whatever reason, but that whole neighborhood has changed now, because now they're looking for ways during the summer to figure out how to just chat and get to know each other better. But it was that first conversation that led to the guy across the street videotaping this house so that the police could, you know, and they got him out of there. So,
Right.
but it was that finally somehow getting something going. But it was the neighbors who did it. Right.
Hey guys, let me do a demonstration right quick. You gotta get this in class. The guy says, this right here is a kilo of cocaine. Right here. This right here is a 9mm. Kilo of cocaine, 2.3 pounds, Peruvian flakes. This is 9mm. This could sit on this table or any community for 100 years and not be touched. Cocaine and a gun could not be touched for 100 years. If you have a mindset, if you have been conditioned to believe you are worth nothing, you don't have no goals in this society called America, that everything you do, even with the laws, black people are not even treated fairly with the laws. They can come back with some crack cocaine laws and then powder cocaine. A white person can get stopped and a black person can get stopped. When they came out with the whole war on crime, on drugs, it was a war on black and brown people. It didn't have nothing to do with drugs. Because even with a mindset, if people of color, if we being oppressed and not feeling that you're a part of anything, every opportunity that you try, everything that you try to do, every act that you try to perform, you are always, as you just said, labeled a criminal, or you are always viewed as a suspect. We have institutional, systemic racism in this country, and it's not no accident. The doctor was saying, it's not broken. The system is not broken. That's one thing that we got to get around. This system is not broken. This system was designed for people of color came over here to pick cotton, nothing else. We must be clear about that. People of color was brought over here to pick cotton. There's no more cotton to pick. That's why President Barack Obama is being treated the way he's treated. And we are under an illusion if we think that voting, and you see what's happening with the voting. We got 14 states right now that are choosing by design, not by accident. They are choosing to come with different procedures that you have to jump through to be able to vote. If everybody is an American in this country, if you are an American, if you were born in this country, you should be allowed to vote. You shouldn't have to have no ID. If you were born in America, that right there should give you the right to vote. So what I wanted to bring out about the drug, if your mindset has been so corrupt, if you look at 1960, 1970, I mean, it's a perfect example of how this drug was brought into, and then the crack was developed on purpose, y'all. This crack was developed on purpose. This was not an accident. Because they had been trying, listen, y'all, don't listen to this. In 1929 to 1977, In North Carolina, they intentionally sterilized black women. Intentionally. Tuskegee Institute, they intentionally gave syphilis to 500 black men on purpose to watch them die. On purpose. Not an accident, guys. Henrietta Lacks, in 1951, a black woman, a sheriff, cervical cancer. She's the only human being alive that her gene was harvested, and it started the biotech industry. Her family, she died of cancer. Her family has cancer now. Johns Hopkins College, the one that did it and exported all of it around the world. It's a billions of dollars, trillion-dollar industry. The family is still suffering today, haven't gotten a penny off of her tumor that is the only tumor in the history of mankind that has ever been able to be cultivated in the lab. Show you what this country do. In 1950, in Florida and Georgia, the CIA intentionally infected people of color with the mosquito virus. And it goes on and on. In 2000, in New York, 34 black and Hispanic boys was given formaldehyde to treat them on the theory that black boys were more prone to criminal behavior. All I'm pointing out, guys, is that information is so important because so often, as with labeling and anything in our society, we all have been lied to. We continue to be lied to. Most of it is based on fear. Human nature is to protect your species. Human beings, we are geared and we are hardwired to protect ourselves. There's a clear, when you think about danger is real. Fear, a lot of times, is self-made or man-made. A lot of times, we make up fear about each other, where European Americans and Americans of African descent, we are constantly at this, continue to be fighting over what? When one person moves into a community, other people move out, and then you think about the advantages. If we look at welfare, y'all, just for a minute. Welfare. Was welfare created to assist black people? No. The white community has a higher percentage rate of conviction for welfare fraud. People don't realize that. Black single parents with children represent the largest percentage of households on welfare? No, there are more white people on welfare than it is black people. But you wouldn't know that by the news. Then why is that? There are more white people in America than it is black people. That's something that most people don't realize. And then another alarming thing is, people have a tendency to think that we live in a society that we all are going to get away with or not be challenged. All of us are going to die one day. And when you talk about being afraid to talk to your neighbors, that is designed on purpose. There's a system, there's propaganda. We're living in an age, when you talk about Facebook and Twitter, we're living in an age where Hitler would be loving this. And if you think about the way things are going, we're living in a time where Hitler, it's amazing how if you don't pay attention to what you do in life or in history, it repeats itself. And we are repeating some things that we should have gotten and never got. Some of the just simple things about treating each other fairly, about fair education, fair housing, fair employment. It should, and it's a fact. If you've been here for 500 years, if you think about America as been an experiment, America is 500 years young. Spain and Portugal and all them countries been around for thousands of years, guys. America only been around for 500 years. We're a baby on the block. But think about this, guys. We 5% of the world population and use 85% of the world natural resources. We 5% of the world population and lock up 25% of our people. We 5% of the world population, and we use 85% of the drugs on the world. And we don't own there's no poppy fields here. We don't own no ships. We don't own no planes. So you say, how is, with the military that we have, with all the high-tech surveillance and everything that they can do, how is this drug getting into our community? But now, you got a high rate of heroin happening in the white community. Now police officers have this kit in their cars, y'all, to help white people that's overdosed from heroin. Y'all think about that. And instead of saying, we're going to lock them up, back in the 80s and 90s, we're going to lock up these black people because of crack cocaine. Black people was pushing it too. I'm not going to put it all on white people. Black and white people would lock them up, and lock them up. As opposed to drugs is a disease. Drugs is a disease. How do you cure a disease? You got to go in there and break that disease. That's how you cure a disease. You got to go in there and break the disease. You can't think about putting a Band-Aid on it or anything like that. Drugs and violence are a disease. And how you combat that? And a lot of times with violence is predicated basically on the lack of resources. Most often, when you have jobs, the brother mentioned about Flint at one time was the model city of America, guys. People working in shops was making more money than doctors and lawyers, y'all, at one time in General Motors. And crime rate was almost minuscule. So there's a real correlation between crime and employment. And when people are not employed, underemployed, lack of employment, most human beings are going to try to do whatever they can to survive. And especially when when your educational system is being destroyed on purpose. The public school system is being destroyed on purpose. Because number one, this country called America never wanted, if you are ruling, if you have power, I don't want my slave to be able to take my power. I don't want my slave to be able to take over my position. That's the country that we live in. I'm sorry, did y'all get the illustration? Everybody? Did I lose anybody? I know I get passionate about it, so I'm sorry.
But what you're saying says hopelessness. What I heard you say was that all of these barriers are put in place that we have no way of dealing with because they're all put in place. So what do? We have to do something because you already said the people who are in power aren't going to look at raising those people who they use and take advantage of. They're not going to do that. So again, what are we going to do?
I think we have perfect examples if you study the history of especially people and all people. I didn't want to just paint a bleak picture, but I was giving the truth.
Yes.
And even in the truth, even with the importation of our ancestors to this country, we were never supposed to survive. And we have President Barack Obama. We have Dr. Charles Grant invented the golf tee. I mean, we have invented and created many, many wonderful things. Most of us don't realize it. Most black people don't realize what black people have invented. So it's not hopelessness. What it is, once you understand the truth and the foundation, once you understand what you got to do with power, collectively by coming together and saying, we all in this together. Once you see what power is doing to all of us, even poor whites. Policing was started to catch runaway slaves. What they did, how they tricked white people, they told white people, you catch runaway, if you see any slaves, you catch them, you're going to get paid for that. And so what they did for white people, although white people were poor, many white people didn't own slaves. Most white people didn't own slaves. But they benefited from it. They had the privilege of it. So you have the privilege of being white, being right. As long as you was white, you were right, no matter what anybody else said. If a black person said you did such and such, a black person didn't have no power, but a white person does. Once we can get our white brothers and sisters that are experiencing the same things that we are, meaning the stratification of the income, the destruction of the middle class is going to really bring people together. This ain't no joke. The middle class, again, at one time was in a position, and now they're looking around saying, what did happen to my 401k? What did happen to all my money? All that stuff has been slipped away by all these, the Wall Street criminals. If you want to say who the real criminals are, the Wall Street, the congressmen and the senators, the district attorneys, the DA and the sheriff, if you want to say who the real criminals are. But a lot of times we point the fingers at people that have no power because they're convenient. But once we realize what the fundamentals are and the foundation is, we can start working together where we have a joint, we have interests that we have together. Meaning, how can we rebuild our community together? How can we do this together? And Tendai talks are elements to where we can wash out some of the things, some of the problems that we have with each other and find some truth in how we can work together. When you're saying, okay, if you were redlined, or you weren't able to get this job, or weren't able to get this loan, then back in the old days, they used to send white people in to test it to see if the white person with the same credentials were able to get the loan or the job. We're going to have to go back to doing some of those things. But what we have to do together collectively is we're going to have to identify what the issue is, meaning even in our communities, even with no grocery stores on the north side. There's nowhere in the world that we can sit in our communities today or in our churches and there are no grocery stores on the north side, no fresh fruit on the north side. Collectively, all of us should be concerned about that. Not just black people, Hispanic people, or Chaldean people. It should be a situation where all of us should be concerned. So I'm just saying that I'm hoping that by our ancestors willing to fight, even though they were, right now we got the right to vote to some degree. At one time in this society, we didn't. So that's something to be excited about. At one time, we didn't. We weren't able to have or make an income because we were slaves. Now we were enslaved. Now we are in high-tech slavery now. But again, unless we're willing to, like you said, just give up totally, we have to be committed as long as we're alive, because history has shown when people come together and work together, we can do some awesome things. And I think that's what Tendai Talks is all about, is how we can really, you got to understand where you came from. It's important. You got to understand what's behind you before you can have a clue what's around you. Dr. Tendai always talked about that. You have to know what was going on in your history to know how you can deal with the present. Because the history is the whole reason we are today and how we can go into the